After I've marked the two holes for the eyes, the centers, I put a little dimple with this punch. I don't really use the punch, I just push a little bit. The wood is relatively soft and goes in okay. And then I put a dimple in over here. But one of the little tricks I've seen on the internet, because this is a little bit of a soft wood, pine is not considered, certainly not considered a hardwood. Sometimes the Forstner bit will tear a little bit around the edges. So one of the very bright lure makers on YouTube came up with a little idea of using a bit of crazy glue. What you do is you put a drop of it right in the hole and you kind of smush it around a little bit, same as on this side, and then you wait roughly 10 minutes, because this is a Gorilla super glue. It's as good as others. I don't say that this is the best, but this stuff is a little bit thicker and takes a little bit more time to harden. So while I'm doing some other work, you may be able to see it more on this one, but it's drying right now. So I'm going to go over to the drill press here right away. And by the way, the 18mm eye that I'm using for these 8-inch lures equates to a 3/4 inch Forstner bit. I don't have Forstner bits in millimeters, but 3/4 is a really nice fit. And one of the things that I've never been able to find is a carbide Forstner bit. And that would be really great, because keeping your Forstner bits razor sharp would make these eyes just that much better. Cutting the eyes is a bit of an awkward thing. You see how this is angled? So you got a flat surface going against an angled surface. And what you do is you kind of line it up as best you can. I put a little dimple where the center of the Forstner bit should go, and then you start the hole, and then you kind of tilt it a little bit to get the back part of the hole to be at least the depth that you need to countersink the eye. So let's try one and see how it goes. So this is what it looks like. This edge here is usually quite a deep ridge because of the angle that it's being dug at. But the eye will fit in there very, very nicely. For the 7-inch lure, things aren't quite as easy. I don't have a 7-inch go-by. This is the 8-inch that we were using to take our measurements off of. But I still have my picture. So what I have done is I have measured from the tip of the lure to what I think is the center of the eye. And it's not a precision measurement, but it doesn't really have to be. And then I transpose that onto each of the 7-inch lures. And what I've decided to do this on the 7-inch lure is use a smaller eye, and you can see the difference in size of eyes here. So if I'm putting that up there, you'll see that it fits. I know it's pulled back a little bit, but it fits better with the 7-inch size. And so what I've done is I decided where the first hole should go simply by doing a rather crude, looks okay there. Then I kind of identify the center of the eye, and I put a mark. And then all of the other 3 eyes are based on the distance between the center line and the original mark. So all of these lures have had some of my Gorilla super glue put on them. Hard to see. Not sure if the camera will be able to see it. And I'm going to drill them out with, this is a 5/8 Forstner bit. Happens to work extremely well for 15mm. So here are all the lures, the 2 7-inch, 2 8-inch, and kind of the go-by. I've kind of just laid the eyes in there. Just because this one's yellow doesn't mean it's going to be yellow. Kind of depends on the shade of the hook, whether I like yellow or the silver. Now, one of the last things we have to do is cut in the gills. So how do you do that? Well, what I do is I take another copy of this, that's the 8-inch, and I cut the gill out on this edge. Then I take the back half and cut the gill out on that side. So this red I've removed for the gill. Now that's going to provide a template for the 8-inch. I'm going to have to do the same for the 7-inch. And then once I get that, I'll come back and show you how I carve the gills. So here I am wrapping the headpiece around the lure. So it's a flat piece of paper on a contoured surface, but it fits pretty good. And very lightly I'm going to mark this gill. Now these gills go quite a ways up towards the face of the lure. So the pencil doesn't like to follow the paper, but you got to kind of do the best you can. And I'm hoping you can see that. So now, in order to do the other side, of course I have to flip it over. You don't get the pretty painted side, but I always turn it around to make sure that the gills are symmetric. So you'll see that this gill so there you have the eye side, if you will, of the gill. And if you wanted to, you could actually freehand the rest. Now you might want to try and stop it in roughly the same place. But some of my lures go all the way to the face. It's really kind of up to you. Now the next part is going to be just a guide. So when I'm cutting this in, I use a razor knife with a long blade, and I'm cutting and I'm cutting, and what I'll do is I'll put a big cut straight down, and then I cut to it. So it's not very common to have two identical gills. But if I do this, I'll kind of get a guide. And that's really all I'm looking for. Well, you can see that gill kind of showing up there. And if I was to hand draw it in, I might try and do this. So I use the typical X-Acto knife. I always start when I'm doing gills with a brand new super sharp blade, because that's important. And I'm going to cut down on the side of the gill that is towards the eyes, and then I'm going to cut at an angle to it. Go slow. Try not to cut over the line. Okay, so I don't want to come right to the center where both gills never touch on a real fish. So I'm going to start cutting into that line, and I use my thumb on the back of the blade just to give it a little bit more force and a little bit more control. And you can see when I hit that cut line, I start to get slivers coming off. Now you're going to go back to this line several times throughout making the gills, and it'll get deeper and deeper. Which is what you want. Now, I don't know if you can see that first piece that's taken out of there. So ultimately you'd like to be able to get something like 220 paper in there to sand off any rough spots. So that can kind of give you a gauge on how deep to go. So here we go with the sandpaper. And there you have your very first cut in gill. 4 lures, 8 gills, I got 7 to go. What we have to do now, remember I promised you that we're now in the stages where we're getting ready to paint. So there's a couple things we have to do. One of the things is we have to finish off sanding these holes that we put in for putting in lead. So that's our first task. After that's completed, we have to dribble in 2-part epoxy into all of these openings, and that will seal the lure. So I thought I would show you the filler that I use. This is a Elmer's filler, and it comes in 2 colors. One is a white and one is a natural wood color. I prefer the white because when you put it on, it dries white. It actually looks purple. There's a drying element in it that tells you when it's dry, which I don't know if it works or not, but I like the white stuff. So if you look at it here, it's I use a very small screwdriver as a bit of a spatula, and I'll put it on top. all 4 of these are done now, and always use your fingers to go over them because they'll tell you things that your eyes cannot see. So the next step is to fill the tip, the head of the lure, with epoxy. So what's going to happen is you're going to mix some epoxy, dribble it down there, and it's going to continue to sink a little bit, and because it's 5-minute epoxy, it will most certainly thicken up at some point, and then you're going to add some more, and then you're going to add some more, and as it continues to drip down, you'll continue to fill it up. And it's my opinion that having a complete pour for your head loop is important. So even though it might contain 2 or 3 different batches, they're all done literally within minutes of each other. So let's try that. Let me jump ahead though and show you what the finished product should look like. Now you can notice that the epoxy has kind of gone on to the wood side, and it goes in 1/16 of an inch. That's a really good idea, because now that whole thing, when it gets really hard in 2 or 3 days, that'll be one solid unit, and you will have a devil of a time breaking that. So if you can't break it, certainly a fish will have a hard time breaking it. So what I do, pretty simple. I take some Gorilla 5-minute epoxy. This is my favorite because it has a working time where you can actually cut it. So about after 2 to 8 hours or so, chances are you may have put in too much and you may need to trim it a little bit. Well, trimming with a razor knife is much easier than sanding. So I'll get in there with a razor knife and trim off what I don't want. And then the next day, or maybe even the day after, that's when you can sand this stuff. Now this stuff, the reason I use the Gorilla 5-minute epoxy, there's many things that I don't much care about. Some of the filler, plus minus, but this Gorilla stuff is really strong after 2 or 3 days, and I really like this stuff. So all I do is put a goodly amount. I take a 1/16 chunk of stainless steel that is kind of a waste material when I'm making smaller lures. It makes an ideal mixer. And I mix it very well. Now, hopefully the camera can focus on this. So here's the lure. One of the first things I do is I straighten up the loop according to the glue marks in the face. Doesn't have to be perfect, but being interested in consistency, so there's the first drip going in. And you kind of work it around. Grab some more. Put that in on the other side.